Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om 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 Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Hare Krishna. It's January 2nd, 2021. And today is the anniversary of the disappearance day of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Goswami, the spiritual master of Srila Prabhupada. And this morning, before japa, we read a transcription of a lecture given by Srila Bhaktisiddhanta about the responsibility of accepting the role of guru. A very moving and powerful lecture. I'm assuming it was a recording that was transcribed, but I don't know for sure. Maybe one of his disciples just took careful notes. I'm not sure, because 1920s, 1930s recordings were not so common. So I'll start here. Namo Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prastaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Niti Namine Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pacharine Nirvishesha Shunyabadi Paschatya Deshitarine Namo Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prastaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Ti Namine. I offer my respectful obeisances unto His Divine Grace Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur Prabhupada, who is very dear to Lord Krishna on this earth, having taken shelter at his lotus feet. Sri Varshabhanavi Devi Daitaya Kripabdaye Krishna Sambandha Vigyana Daine Prabhave Namaha. I offer my respectful obeisances to Sri Varshabhanavi Devi Daita Das, another name of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, who is favored by Srimati Radharani and who is the ocean of transcendental mercy and the deliverer of the science of Krishna. Madhuryo Jvala Premadya Sri Rupanuga Bhaktida Sri Gora Karuna Shakti Vigrahaya Namostute. I offer my respectful obeisances unto you, the personified energy of Sri Chaitanya's mercy, who delivered devotional service enriched with conjugal love of Radha and Krishna, coming exactly in the line of the revelation of Srila Rupa Goswami. Namaste Gauravani Sri Murtaye Dinatarine Rupano Vudhapa Siddhanta Dvanta Harine. I offer my respectful obeisances unto you, who are the personified teachings of Lord Chaitanya. You are the deliverer of the fallen souls. You do not tolerate any statement against the teachings of devotional service enunciated by Srila Rupa Goswami. Hare Krishna, welcome. Okay, so over the years on the appearance and disappearance days of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta, sometimes we've heard or read a lecture from Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada gave many lectures on the disappearance and appearance days of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta. Sometimes we've read excerpts of biographies of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta given to us by Srila Prabhupada or others. Again, this morning we read a transcript of a lecture from Srila Bhaktisiddhanta. And so one particular writing of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta that Srila Prabhupada directly gave us is the Sri Brahma Samhita. And so I thought to read, we can read a verse. I put it on the screen here. This is text 38 of Brahma Samhita. When we say text 38, technically it's 538, chapter 5, text 38. But suppose, what my understanding is, Brahma Samhita has 100 chapters, and they were all lost to antiquity until until about 500 years ago, 600 years ago, Lord Chaitanya in the Adi Keshava temple, he found one chapter about Brahma Samhita, and that's the 5th chapter. And so that's what we have. And Bhaktisiddhanta translated it and gave purports in English. And so I ran across a quote from Srila Bhaktisiddhanta. Yeah, I ran across a quote, and Bhaktisiddhanta Goswami, he says, well, it was maybe 1920s or so, and he encountered a wealthy businessman in India, and this person was very impressed with the mats, the temples that Bhaktisiddhanta was establishing. And he tells to Bhaktisiddhanta, he says, you should open a temple in every city. And Bhaktisiddhanta said, my real business is to establish a temple in everyone's heart. So I believe this verse from Sri Brahma Samhita intimately relates to Bhaktisiddhanta's statement, my real business is to establish a temple in everyone's heart. So this is text 38 of Brahma Samhita. Prema Anjana Charita Bhakti Vilochanena Anta Sada Eva Vidayeshu Vilokayanti Yam Yama Sundaram Achintya Guna Varupam Govindam Adipurusham Aham Bhajami Premanjana Charita Bhakti Vilochanena Santa Sadaiva Hridayeshu Vilokayanti Yam Shama Sundaram Achintya Gunaswarupam Govinda Madi Pusham Tamaham Bhajami Premanjana Charita Bhakti Vilochanena Santa Sadaiva Hridayeshu Vilokayanti Yam Shama Sundaram Achintya Gunaswarupam Damari Purusham Tamaham Bhajami Premanjana Charita Bhakti Vilochanena Santa Sadaiva Hridayeshu Vilokayanti Jamba Sundaram Achintya Gunaswarupam Govinda Madi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami Premanjana Charita Bhakti Vilochanena
Santa Sadaiva Hridayeshtu Vilokayanti.
Santa Sadaiva Hridayeshu Vilokayanti.
Yam Shama Sundaram Achyutta Gunaswarupam.
Yam Shama Sundaram Achintya Gunaswarupam.
Govindamadi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami.
Govindamadi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami.
Premanjana Charita Bhakti Vilochanena.
Anjana Charita Bhakti Vilochanena.
Santa Sadaiva Hridayeshu Vilokayanti.
Santa Sadaiva Hridayeshu Vilokayanti.
Yam Shama Sundaram Achintya Guna Swarupam.
Yam Shama Sundaram Achintya Gunaswarupam.
Govidam Purusham Tamaham Bhajami.
Govindamari Purusham Tamaham Bhajami.
Premanjana Churita Bhakti Vilochanena.
Vimanjana Charita Bhakti Vilochanena.
Santa Sadaiva Hridayeshu Vilokayanti.
Santa Sadaiva Hridayeshu Vilokayanti.
Yam Shama Sundaram Achintya Guna Swarupam.
Yam Shama Sundaram Achintya Gunaswarupam.
Govindamadi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami.
Govindamari Purusham Tamaham Bhajami.
Premanjana Churita Bhakti Vilochanena.
Premanjana Charita Bhakti Vilochanena.
Santa Sadaiva Hridayeshu Vilokayanti.
Santa Sadaiva Hridayeshu Vilokayanti.
Yam Shanda Sundaram Achintya Guna Swarupam.
Yam Shama Sundaram Achintya Gunaswarupam.
Govinda Madipurusham Tamaham Bhajami.
Govindamadi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami. Prema, prema, of love, of love. Anjana, Anjana, with the salve,
With the salve.
Charita,
Charita.
tinged,
Tinged.
Bhakti,
Bhakti.
of devotion,
Of devotion.
Vilochanena,
Vilochanena.
with the eye,
With the eye.
Santa,
Santa.
the pure devotees,
The pure devotees.
Sada,
Sada.
always,
Always.
Eva,
Eva.
indeed,
Indeed.
Hridayeshu,
Hridayeshu.
in their hearts,
In their hearts.
Vilokayanti,
Vilokayamti.
see,
See.
Yam,
Yam.
Whom, Shama,
Shama.
dark blue,
Dark blue.
Sundaram,
Sundaram.
beautiful,
Beautiful.
Achintya,
Achintya.
inconceivable,
Inconceivable.
Guna,
Guna.
with attributes,
With attributes.
Swarupam,
Swarupam.
whose nature is endowed,
Whose nature is endowed.
Govindam,
Govindam.
Govinda,
Govinda.
Adipurusham,
Adipurusham.
the original person,
The original person.
Tam,
Tam.
him,
Him.
Aham,
Aham.
I,
I.
Bhajami,
Bhajami.
worship.
Worship.
I worship Govinda, the primeval Lord, who is Shama Sundar, Krishna himself, with inconceivable, innumerable attributes, whom the pure devotees see in their heart of hearts, with the eye of devotion tinged with the salve of love. Purport by Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Goswami Maharaj. The Shamasundar form of Krishna is his inconceivable, simultaneous, personal and impersonal, self-contradictory form. True devotees see that form in their purified hearts under the influence of devotional trance. The form Sham is not the blue color visible in the mundane world, but is the transcendental variegated color affording eternal bliss, and is not visible to the mortal eye. On a consideration of the trance of Vyasadeva, as in the shloka, Bhakti Yogena Manasi, etc., it will be clear that the form of Sri Krishna is the full personality of Godhead and can only be visible in the heart of a true devotee, which is the only true seat in the state of trance under the influence of devotion. When Krishna manifested himself in Vraja, both the devotees and non-devotees saw him with this very eye.
Can you move the screen?
What's that?
Will you move the screen for us to see the purport?
Yes, yeah, I'll do that. Yeah. Yes.
Thank you.
Good. Okay. When Krishna manifested himself in Vraja, both the devotees and non-devotees saw him with this very eye, but only the devotees cherished him, eternally present in Vraja as the priceless jewel of their heart. Nowadays also the devotees see him in Vraja in their hearts, saturated with devotion, although they do not see him with their eyes. The eye of devotion is nothing but the eye of the pure, unalloyed spiritual self of the jiva. The form of Krishna is visible to that eye in proportion to its purification by the practice of devotion. When the devotion of the neophyte reaches the stage of bhava bhakti, the pure eye of that devotee is tinged with the salve of love by the grace of Krishna, which enables him to see Krishna face to face. The phrase "in their hearts" means Krishna is visible in proportion as their hearts are purified by the practice of devotion. The sum and substance of this shloka is that the form of Krishna, who is Shamasundar, Natavar, best dancer, Murlidhar, holder of the flute, and Sri Banga, triple bending, is not a mental concoction, but is transcendental and is visible with the eye of the soul of the devotee under trance. Om Jnana-timirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshur Unmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Mano Bhishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Svaya Rupa Kadamayam Darati Svapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavams Cha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Saganaraganatam Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Saitan Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Pradan Sagana Lalita Shri Vishakan Vitams Cha Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopisha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namoste Tapta Kanchana Gorange Radhe Vrindavaneshware Rishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Panchakalpa Tuyubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhyeva Cha Patitanan Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasari Gaura Bhakta-vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Premanjana Charita Bhakti Vilochanena Santa Sadaiva Hridayeshu Vilokayanti Yam Shama Sundaram Achintya Gunasvarupam Govinda Maripusham Tamaham Bhajami. I worship Govinda, the primeval Lord, who is Shama Sundar, Krishna himself, possessing innumerable transcendental attributes, and whom the pure devotees see in their heart of hearts with the eye of devotion tinged with the salve of love. Okay. So this is okay. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. Yes, good. Yeah. So Srila Bhaktisiddhanta wrote in many languages. This is the only book that Prabhupada directly gave us to read. Not this verse so much, but in some sections of all of Bhaktisiddhanta's writings, his writings use very sophisticated English, and they take quite some concentration to try to understand what he's saying. The first verse of Brahma Samhita, chapter 5. Ishvara Parama Krishna Satchidananda Vigraha Nadir Adir Govinda Sarva Karana Karanam. So Lord Brahma establishes Krishna as the supreme controller amongst all controllers. His body is Satchidananda Vigraha. It's a form made of eternity, knowledge, and bliss. And he's the source of everything, and he has no source. Sarva, he's the cause of all causes, like that. Okay, and then so then this verse, this Premanjana verse. It's a very famous verse in the Vaishnava world. Prabhupada quotes it a lot. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta emphasizes it a lot. So this is the 10th in a series, really, of 27 or 29 verses. There's 62 verses in this chapter 5 of Brahma Samhita, and the first 28 are sort of like a prelude, starting with Ishvara Parama Krishna Satchidananda Vigraha, and then starting with 29, which is the Chintamani verse, Chintamani Prakarasat Masukalpa Vriksha Laksha Viteshu Surabira Bipalayantam Lakshmi Sahasrasata Sambrahma Savyamanam Govinda Madi Pusham Tamaham Bhajami. I worship Govinda, the primeval Lord, the first progenitor, who is tending the cows, yielding all desires and abodes built of spiritual gems, surrounded by millions of purpose trees and served with great reverence and affection by hundreds and thousands of Lakshmis or Gopis. So that's the first verse of this series, which 27 verses that end Govinda Madi Pusham Tamaham Bhajami. And this Premanjana, this is the 10th verse in that 27 verse series. Then after that 27 verse series, there's 2 verses, and I'm just going to read the translation, just so we enter into the feel here. I worship that. So this is Bhaktisiddhanta translating into English Lord Brahma in Brahma Samhita. Basically, Krishna, see the beginning of Brahma Samhita here, Krishna initiates Brahma as a Brahmin. He gives him the Gayatri, initiates him as a Brahmin, and in that Brahmin initiation ceremony, Brahma has Krishna and the whole spiritual world, Vaikuntha, Goloka, Vrindavan, revealed in his heart. And so it's really he gets the Gayatri, and then Brahma comes out with these direct realizations. All right, so then these are in text 56. Brahma says, "I worship that transcendental seat known as Fetadvip, where his loving consorts, the Lakshmis, in their unalloyed spiritual essence, practice the amorous service of the Supreme Lord Krishna as their only lover. Where every tree is a transcendental purpose tree, where the soil is the purpose gem, all water is nectar, every word is a song, every gate is a dance, the flute is the favorite attendant, effulgence is full of transcendental bliss, and the supreme spiritual entities are all enjoyable and tasty. Where numberless milk cows always emit transcendental oceans of milk, where there is eternal existence of transcendental time, who is ever present and without past or future, and hence is not subject to the quality of passing away, even for the space of half a moment. That realm is known as Goloka only to a very few self-realized souls in this world. Hare Krishna. Okay, so there's a whole world there. So today we read the Premanjana verse, that's 38. So text 37, again, just to continue to enter into the field. Text 37 has like a 10-page purport. We're not going to read it, but we will read the translation. Well, first, the Sanskrit. This is Lord Brahma speaking, sharing his revelations about Krishna and Goloka Vrindavan. Ananda Chinmaya Rasa Pratibhavita Bistabirya Eva Nijagupataya Kalabi Goloka Eva Nivasatya Kilat Mabuto Govinda Madi Pusham Tamaham Bhajami. I worship Govinda, the primeval Lord, residing in his own realm, Goloka, with Radha, resembling his own spiritual figure, the embodiment of the ecstatic potency possessed of the 64 artistic activities, in the company of her confidants, Sakis, embodiments of the extensions of her bodily form, permeated and vitalized by his ever blissful spiritual ras. And then the purport's long, because Srila Bhaktisiddhanta gives a description of those 64 artistic activities embodied by Srimati Radharani. There are many things in Brahma Samhita that are not found anything else, philosophically and devotionally. There are many points here, not just points, but realizations in Brahma Samhita that philosophically and devotionally that are only found here, that are distinctive to Sri Brahma Samhita. And so here, so again, I came across a quote from Bhaktisiddhanta. Some of you weren't here a few minutes ago, so I'll just briefly narrate the story again. So in the 1920s or 1930s, a wealthy Indian business person was very impressed with Bhaktisiddhanta's mats, the temples he had established, and he told Bhaktisiddhanta, yes, you should build a temple in every city. And Bhaktisiddhanta said, my real business is to establish a temple in everyone's heart. So this is, so we can, I mean, that's something to meditate on. To what extent is our real business to establish a temple in everyone's heart? And so this verse is all about that. I worship Govinda, the primeval Lord, who is Shama Sundar, Krishna himself, with inconceivable, innumerable attributes, whom the pure devotees see in their heart of hearts, with the eye of devotion tinged with the salve of love. There's a lecture sometimes we read the transcription. Prabhupada's talking about the eye, and he goes, it's not the eye, this gelatinous thing that's floating in some corpuscles and some liquid. It's not the eye that sees. It's actually the soul that sees. It's actually the soul that sees. So the soul has eyes, the soul has ears, the soul has legs. And the spiritual senses, the spiritual body, the knowledge acquiring senses, the acting senses of our spiritual body is revived. It's manifested, it's developed as we practice this bhakti. So Bhaktisiddhanta is making the point. He's making the point that that attitude of loving devotional service, that's then we're qualified to see Shamam Tribanga Lalitani Ata Prakasham, the graceful threefold bending form of Shama Sundar, playing on his flute with beautiful jeweled ornaments on his hands and head bedecked with peacock feather, that eternally manifest in the heart of the devotee. So the eyes of devotion, it's such beautiful poetic language, whom the pure devotees see in their heart of hearts, with the eye of devotion tinged with the salve of love. So Bhaktisiddhanta, in the purport, he references Srila Vyasadeva, he says, on a consideration of the trance of Vyasadeva, as in the shloka Bhakti Yogena Manasi, etc., it will be clear that the form of Sri Krishna is the full personality of Godhead and can only be visible in the heart of a true devotee, which is the only true seat in the state of trance under the influence of devotion. And so Bhaktisiddhanta is referring to the trance of Vyasadeva that moved and inspired Vyasadeva to write, but it's not writing in the typical sense of, I wrote a novel, I wrote a history book. It's really that that Vyasadeva revealed the Bhagavatam as a result of this trance. That trance is described in the Srimad Bhagavatam, 1st canto, 7th chapter, text 4. Bhakti Yogena Manasi Samyak Pranihite Male Apashat Purusham Purnam Mayam Chatad Apashraya. That after having discussions with his spiritual master Narada Muni, Srila Vyasadeva, who was not satisfied with all the Vedas he compiled, that Srila Vyasadeva went into a trance. He went into a Bhakti Yogena Manasi, means he went into a trance of bhakti. Yeah. Yes. He went into a trance of bhakti. And in that trance, so this is really, really, really significant because Vyasadeva is the compiler of the Vedas. Like even if you go to some yoga center or something, they'll talk about Vedas, Upanishads, like that. So that's why, and it's just like, okay, so who wrote these books? So the Vedas come from Vyasadeva. That's why understanding what's the consciousness of the author, the compiler. And Vyasadeva went to a trance and he realized absolute truth in that trance, and he came out with his commentary on all the Vedas called the Srimad Bhagavatam. And his realization of the absolute truth was not that the highest truth is nothing. The highest truth is matter. The highest truth is undifferentiated white light. No. The highest truth is Sri Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Venum kvanantam aravinda dalaya taksham Varhavatam samasitam buddha sundarangam Kandarpa koti kamaniya vishesha shobam Govinda madi pusham tamaham bhajami. I worship Govinda, the primeval Lord, the first progenitor, who is very adept at playing on his flute, with blooming eyes like lotus petals, and head bedecked with peacock feather, whose figure of beauty is tinged with the hue of dark blue rain clouds, and whose unique loveliness is charming millions of cupids. So Vyasadeva realized that's the absolute truth. And standing to his back is his servant Maya, kind of in the shadows, because she's like the warden of the prison house. She's dealing with some shadowy aspects. She's dealing with us, really. And the impersonal Brahma Gyoti, yeah, those are energetic, that's energetic emanations. And the super soul in the heart, Sarvasya Chahamridi Sanivisto, this is emanation from Bhagavan, Vedanti Tat Tatvavidas Tatvam Yajganman Vayam Brahmeti Paramatmiti Bhagavaniti Shabdite. Three aspects of absolute truth, and supreme source of all of them is Bhagavan, source of the super soul, and that's described here. So Shama Sundar appears as a super soul to the devotees whose eyes are tinged with the salve of love. And so Srila Bhaktisiddhanta he describes the sum and substance of this shloka is that the form of Krishna, who is Shama Sundar, Natavar, best dancer, Murlidhar, holder of the flute, and Sri Banga, triple bending, is not a mental concoction, but is transcendental and is visible with the eye of the soul of the devotee under trance. right? So, okay, so this is a key point. So Bhaktisiddhanta says the form Sham is not the blue color visible in the mundane world, but it's the transcendental variegated color affording eternal bliss and is not visible to the mortal eye. So someone can say, okay, so let me get this right. So you believe that God is blue and plays a flute? So we say, yes, I believe God is blue and plays a flute. What is that blue? About that, I have very little realization. What's flute? About that, I have very little. I know it's not my mundane conception of sounds of the flute. I know it's not the blue I'm seeing as the color of the pillow over there. The point, though, the primary point that we can get, even through logic, is that there's so much variegatedness in this realm, in this world. I've got personality, you've got personality, she's got personality. So how could our source not have personality? There's color we're seeing right now, red and blue and green and yellow and orange and purple. Okay. So how could there be so much variation and variety, color, personality, form, quality, activities, pastimes, relationship, if it doesn't exist in the source? Right? It's like in the Bhagavad Gita, in the 15th chapter, right at the beginning of the 15th chapter, Krishna gives the metaphor of the banyan tree. And so the banyan tree's reflected on the water. And then in the reflection of the tree, the branches, leaves, there might be a fruit, a fig, but it's just, there's nothing substantial to grab onto. I mean, the reflection's real in a sense, but it lacks substance. So many analogies, the dream analogy, the virtual reality analogy, the desert analogy. It's like, okay, we're walking in a dry desert and we see an oasis. We go there, oh, it's just a mirage. The example, and sometimes animals will chase after water, one mirage after the other till the animal dies. So we can conclude, so there is no water. No, and that's not true. There is water. There's just not water in the desert, but there is water. So there is color, there is personality, just not in material illusion life, not in material illusory life. This is all ephemeral. This is lacking substance. We're thinking it's real because we're identifying with the dream. We're identifying with the dream. Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, na tad basayate suyo vishashanko no pashaka. Yatka tadama paramam mama. Yadgatva nagdivartate tadama paramam mama. Krishna says, but there's another world. There's another world, the world of spirit, where everything's truly substantial, eternal, not where the forms are eternal. And he goes, in that world, there's no need for sun, moon, or electricity, because each atom is self-effulgent. The Chintamani atoms are self-effulgent. So this process of bhakti yoga, it's opening us, we're gradually transforming our senses, our mind, our intelligence. We're transforming our body to perceive and experience the actual blue, the substantial blue and red, substantial form, substantial quality, substantial flute, substantial music. That which has no end, just like yes. Right, so we know that like in this world, in the material realm, there's the three modes of nature. Maya is the source of the three modes of material nature. And the three modes of nature are unmanifest in the pradhan, and then the force of time comes and time moves things along, and then the different illusory form. Material energy is eternal, but the forms it takes are temporary, and the way we perceive them is illusory. I am this body. Okay, no, that's illusory. But the energy consisting that we call the body, the energy is real, but the forms are temporary, and our perceptions, I, me, mine, are illusory. Rather than saying, this is an energy of Krishna, let me use it in Krishna's service. So the three modes of nature, Rajas, Tamas, and Sattva. And we can say that, like in Sattva Tov, like anything we're endeavoring to do, essentially it's about supporting ourselves and others to come towards Sattva, to come towards Sattva. And Sattva essentially means expanded range of choice. That's essentially we could think. Sattva means that I'm smiling peacefully all the time. Not necessarily. Sattva could mean that I'm choosing to be fierce and angry to fulfill my purpose and protect important boundaries and to protect what's dear. Whereas till I came to Sattva, I was too controlled by ignorant fear to connect with my anger. Sattva could look like there are so many disturbances, pandemics, and annoying people and insects. And I'm choosing to be peaceful, undisturbed, in a good, jolly mood. So Sattva essentially means expanded range of choice, expanded awareness. We often quote Carl Jung, till we make the unconscious conscious, it will direct our life, and we'll call it fate. So that means coming from tamas and rajas towards sattva. Oh, I realize that all this depression is to get the payoff of attention. All this resentment is to get the payoff of feeling superior. It's sattva, that we're raising awareness. Yes, I'm hanging on to shame because I don't want to really, it's an excuse to not go for my life purpose and risk failure. So I hang on to shame, and I've been deceiving myself that it's humility or whatever. Okay, so it's all sattva, raising awareness. Now we might say, I would tend to say, that most of the sattva we come to is what I'll call kind of like material sattva. Like it might be mixed with some rajas and tamas. Okay, so also here in this verse, essentially, Bhaktisiddhanta, Srila, and Sri Brahma, they're also essentially talking about the soul revealing, the soul uncovering deep truths within that were not manifest. Okay, and that's the same thing. Like, yes, that truth about who I am as the person of my contract. I'm a powerful, loving, decisive man, or whatever it is. So revealing truth. So that's sattva. So it's the same principle here. I will say though that this is what's called Shuddha sattva or Vishuddha sattva. This is really the sattva that's happening eternally in the spiritual world. And the material sattva in the material realm, it's a glimpse of it. It's like it's approaching that. It's the closest to it compared to all the material modes. Material sattva is pretty much tends to be mixed with rajas and tamas to some extent. So in this verse, Pranamanjana charita bhakti vilochanena santasa deva vidayeshu vilokayanti yam shama sundaram achincha gunasrupam Govinda Madi Pusham Tamaham Bhajami. I worship Govinda, the primeval Lord, who is Shama Sundar, Krishna himself possessing inconceivable, innumerable attributes, and whom the pure devotees see in their heart of hearts with the eyes of devotion tinged with the salve of love. This is Shuddha sattva, Vishuddha sattva. Spiritual world is made completely of Shuddha sattva, no tinge of rajas or tamas. That's why it says in one of the other verses we read about where in that spiritual realm, every word is a song, every step is a dance, the water is nectar, etc., etc. So it's a timeless realm. And we know as we approach sattvic experience, then there's not that anxiety of time. Time pushes things on. So time means creation and destruction. So in Vaikuntha, in the spiritual realm, there's no rajas, which means no material creation, and there's no tamas, which means no destruction. Therefore, the transformations of birth, growth, maintenance, byproducts, dwindling, death, they don't apply to the spiritual body, whether Krishna's spiritual body or our spiritual body. Spiritual bodies are described in quite some depth in 6 verses earlier. It's part of the Govindam prayers we sing every morning. Angani yasya sakalendriya vrittimanti pashanti panti kalayanti chiram jaganti ananda chinmaya sarujvala vigrahasya Govinda madi pusham tamaham bhajami. I worship Govinda, the primeval Lord, whose transcendental form is full of bliss, truth, substantiality, and is thus full of the most dazzling splendor. Each of the limbs of that transcendental figure possesses in himself the full-fledged functions of all the organs and eternally sees, maintains, and manifests the infinite universes, both spiritual and mundane. Okay. All right. So we're talking here, you might say, this verse, it talks about personal growth. It talks about transformation and personal growth. Not transformation born of the modes of nature. This is Shuddha Sattva, transformation of the heart on the foundation of pure transcendence, on the foundation of pure transcendence. Okay, okay, I'll pause there. We can recite the verse one more time, and I'll be glad to hear any sharing, comments, or questions. Primanjana Charita Bhakti Vilochanena Shanta Sadaiva Vidayeshu Vilokayanti Yam Shama Sundaram Achintya Gunasvarupam Govinda Madi Pusham Tamaham Bhajami. I worship Govinda, the primeval Lord, who is Shama Sundar, Krishna himself, possessing innumerable, inconceivable attributes, in whom the pure devotees see in their heart of hearts with the eyes of devotion tinged with the salve of love. If anyone's has any inspiration or ready to discipline yourself to learn some verses, this is a good one to learn. This is a good one to learn. This just goes right to the heart of our heart. Hare Krishna. Thank you for your attention. Any questions or comments? Daru, I see your hand up.
Okay, I'm unmuted now. Okay.
I am hearing you.
Okay. Now, in the famous verse, now I may have missed you saying this earlier, but the famous Ishvara Parama Krishna, is that the first verse of this chapter?
Yes.
And then how many verses? What is there, like no more verses until like 35 or something? We get, how's it work?
Yeah, we discussed it a little bit at the beginning of class. So the first verse that ends with Govinda Madi Purusham Tamaha Bhajami is number 29.
Yeah.
The first 28 verses are sort of like an introduction, and towards the end of those first 28 verses, Krishna, he basically gives Brahman initiation to Brahma. And
really?
Yeah, and that's described in Brahma Samhita. So Brahma becomes the first initiated Brahman. And he gets the Gayatri mantra from the flute of Krishna, and in Brahma's ecstatic realization, he gets the vision of beloved. And then verses 29 to 55, they are the 27. They're the 27 verses that end with Govinda Madi Pusham Tamaham Bhajami. Then two a verse or two after that is the verse where Brahma talks about how, yeah, in Goloka Vrindavan, the water is nectar, every step is a dance, every word is.
Right.
Then the last 5 verses, Krishna speaks to Brahma, and Krishna gives, in 5 verses, Krishna gives a summary of all Vaishnava philosophy. It's not, it's a part of Brahma Samhita we don't hear much about, but just really amazing, fascinating. So Krishna gives a summary of all Vaishnava philosophy in those devotional philosophy in those closing verses of the 5th chapter, Brahma Samhita.
But how many chapters were there beyond the 5th that we don't know about?
Well, what I've heard, I think this is somewhere in Prabhupada's teachings, Brahma Samhita has 100 chapters. They were all lost to antiquity till about 550 years ago or something, when Lord Chaitanya found a manuscript of the 5th chapter.
Right.
I think it was the Adi Keshava chapter somewhere, Adi Keshava temple somewhere in South India. So apparently there are 99 other chapters, and we don't have them.
Well, it's always been amazing to me that if this is the 5th chapter and it starts off with such a basic, simple, Ishvara Parama Krishna, you would think that would be like in the 1st chapter, verse 1, not 5th chapter, verse 1. And so, and even some of the other verses too that we have, some of them are very obviously elevated, but others are different level. It's just funny how it always did confuse me how that could be, unless, for example, first Canto Bhagavatam, the simple, what's that, the Tato Brahma Jigyasa, it starts with a simple thing, it starts with Krishna, and then you go backwards to just other things. Well, where does he even come from? But anyhow, I just, do you understand, what's the actual, does it confuse you at all? Just why does it start at 29 with all these other things? I don't know, it kind of threw me off a little bit. It doesn't seem to logically go into growing knowledge, is what I mean. Does it to you? Maybe it does.
Okay, thanks for sharing. We're talking about Brahma Samhita. So it's certainly not for me to conjecture what's in those first 4 chapters or the next 95 chapters.
Yeah.
But that said, no, if we read the first 28 verses, they're not fundamental and foundational. I mean, they're quite esoteric, philosophically and devotionally. Now, as far as if you look at the first verse, Ishvara Parama Krishna, Sach Chidananda Vigraha Anadira Govinda Sarva Karana Karanam.
Right.
Well, okay, a basic principle. So for me, it's not, I'm not saying I understand, but it's not confusing. A basic principle is that everything is everywhere, like a hologram, let's say. Everything is everywhere. So let's take, for example, okay, so there's Sambandha, Abhideya, and Prayojana, right? Sambandha is the essential relationship of the living entity with God, Krishna. Abhideya is the activity or the activities that manifest from that relationship. And Prayojana is the fruit of love of God that is experienced through those activities. Okay, so primarily speaking, Bhagavad Gita emphasizes Sambandha, the essential bondage, the essential connection between the living entity and God. Srimad Bhagavatam primarily emphasizes Abhideya, the activities, the rasas, in that naturally manifest from that devotional relationship. And Chaitanya Charitamrita primarily emphasizes Prema Pum Arto Mahan, primarily emphasizes the prayojana, the result, the fruit of those devotional rasas. But in Bhagavad Gita, we'll find it all. There is definitely prayojana, abhideya in Bhagavad Gita. And in Bhagavatam, we'll find Sambandha and Prayojana, and Chaitanya Charitamrita, we'll find Sambandha and Abhideya. So everything is everywhere. At the same time, certain books, certain literatures emphasize a particular aspect.
Cool. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Dhira. Hare Krishna.
Mhm.
Thank you.
I have a question that may not be directly related with things that you spoke about, but the expression eternal time sounds contradictory.
Is that expression in this purport?
No.
Okay, but you've seen it in Prabhupada's writings?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Oh, I have heard it also, yeah.
All right. So you're
I'll make a search on the database.
okay. That's fine. Yeah. No, I mean, I certainly recall seeing it too. So you're asking eternal time. Well, I guess my understanding is it's the same principle as blue, right? Just like in this purport and verse, the verse talks about dark blue, and Bhaktisiddhanta says, yeah. So there's material temporary blue, and then there's eternal blue. There's material temporary relationships, and then there's eternal relationships. There's material flute and piano, and there's spiritual piano and flute, and et cetera, et cetera. There's material romance and there's spiritual romance. There's eternal spiritual romance. So that basically a time in material sense, yeah, it moves the modes of nature and it creates the forms that take birth and grow and then die, and yeah, that's material time. So there is some spiritual, not just conception, but there's some spiritual experience and realization of, let's call it the original time. And I don't have realization about it, because we do know, as we were speaking, that material time means rajas and tamas, creation, destruction. So spiritual time, it's all Shuddha Sattva there. There's no rajas or creation. There's no tamas or destruction. There's not the 6 changes of body. But there's some original time, just like there's an original blue, there's original cow, there's original sports, there's original river, there's original dancing. So there's some original time that we get experience of as we enter into that eternal realm through loving devotion. You know, sometimes we've discussed the principle of time is time pushes things along. Okay. And so as, you know, as let's call it a possibility. So eternal time, that's bhakti, because what pushes things along in Vaikuntha, in Goloka Vrindavan, it's devotional love. So I can imagine, I think it's a reasonable conjecture that eternal time is bhakti, that eternal love that pushes things along in that place where, in a sense, there's no past or future. Each moment exists eternally. Still, there's that love that moves things, just like material time moves things here, whether we like it or not.
At the time of creation, like it says that with the help of eternal time and the 3 material mode of nature, then things take place. And eternal time is one of the 5 principles from the introduction of the Bhagavad Gita. So it also seems to me, that's what I'm trying to get, like that there is such a thing as called eternal time that's eternally manifest, like the 5 principles from the Bhagavad Gita, Prakriti. Prakriti is always, you know, is cyclic. It's cyclic, so it has a time period to come in and out. But then with Prakriti and eternal time, Kala Shakti. And then you have, Purusha, and then the only one that's destroyable is karma. But then time is not destroyable ever, but it's still cyclic. I'm just thinking of time because time is such elusive energy of the Lord, and it's so easy to squander it. And at the same time, is it possible to squander it? Like that.
Yeah, thanks for that. Right. So we know time is eternal, from the introduction of Bhagavad Gita. And then just like Prakriti is eternal and its manifestations its forms are temporary. Similarly, when time manifests in the material realm, then it moves the modes of nature to manifest as temporary forms. And as you're saying, it's a quality of a devotee is avyarta kalatvam. A devotee is not interested to waste even one moment, even 1 nanosecond. And so yeah, it's not that like time gets wasted, but we can misuse our opportunity to use time to cultivate those eyes of devotion that are tinged with the salve of love. Then there's a saying from Shakespeare's King Richard. King Richard in some speech says, I wasted time, now doth time waste me. So I wasted time. It's not like time itself is lost or injured, but I wasted time. Now here I am getting into the old age of the body, and time is wasting me. Time is destroying me because I did not use my time to develop the consciousness described in this verse, the eyes of devotion tinged with self. I did not use time to become a kitten in the jaws of the cat rather than a rat.
Thank you.
Thank you, Malini. Bhaktalen.
Okay. I am just, hi, David. I'm really amazed that Vyasadeva was like one of the first channelers then. I mean, the importance of the mystical states of altered states of consciousness that brings these literatures to us through Vyasadeva, but also, there's synchronicities in other religions. The Quran was channeled, to Muhammad, I guess, and you have Joseph Smith, who had the Book of Mormon channeled to him in a dream. I'm not sure about whether how the 5 books of Moses, were they're channeled or not, but just that we're not talking about fictional writing here. We're not talking about something concocted. It's a direct communication from God or some superior entity, in the other religions maybe, or the same God, I don't know, but that this is all channeled material that we would call channeled these days.
Yeah.
And it just strikes me as just really interesting. Maybe Vyasadeva was the first channeler, I guess, chronologically.
Mm-hmm.
So, and also that to actually see Shamasundara in the heart, you have to be in some kind of a trance. You have Bhava Bhakti. To reach the stage of Bhava Bhakti, Bhav, that is some kind of a altered state of consciousness, for sure. So, yeah, I don't know if you go along with what I'm saying here or not, but that's my comment.
Yeah, I appreciate your comment. And you're using terminology, channeling altered states of consciousness, and they've become well-known terminologies in the New Age, or whatever you want to call it, meditation research. So yeah, those terms completely apply. In fact, the examples we're talking about, these are the original pure forms of that, and so many ways that those terms are now applied make those terms cheap. They become cliche, but a cliche becomes popular because originally it has profound meaning. So those terms do apply in the profound way, not in the cheap, tawdry way. Channeling altered states of consciousness. Just as a side note, my understanding about Moses, it's the same. Moses went up on Mount Sinai, in the Sinai desert, Mount Sinai, and the books of the Torah were revealed to Moses. So same as Muhammad and Vyasadeva, as far as the leader of the Mormons. That's what I heard, like that. And the way you narrated it. And then yes, so it is, again, not in the cheap way, but Vyasadeva went into a trance. That's why we asked, like, do you do meditation? Do you do yoga? Because I was talking to someone recently, and he's from Canada, and I was at his home after a foundational advanced course. He had stamped the course in 2011, and we were with his parents, his sister, his brother, and his girlfriend of the time. And his girlfriend at the time was into yoga, and she asked, because it was after the course, and he was hosting us for dinner, and she said, "Do you do yoga?" And the reason why I remember this, because I talked to him a few months ago, and he was saying he remembered my response till now, a decade later. And he himself, he's not someone who's into yoga or things like that, but his girlfriend was, and she asked me, "Do you do yoga?" And I said, "Well, if you're talking about sitting in a lotus position or something like that, no, I don't do that. At the same time, if you're talking about the essence of yoga, yes, I endeavor to do that." So the essence of this bhakti yoga, mantra meditation, Bhagavatam class, the essence of everything we're doing in Krishna consciousness, endeavoring to dovetail our occupations, it's meditation. Yeah, that's why we say in our coach training, all these methods, all these skills, transformative coaching, it's all about trance. We don't use that term so much, but it's all about supporting ourselves and others to connect with the highest guidance within, to connect with super soul within. That's what the reflective listening and open-ended questions and the meetings, that's what it's all about. Means it's all about supporting, inspiring meditation on God within the heart, on Shama Sundar within the heart, or at least going in that direction. So that's not like a zombie trance. That's not like an escapist trance. That's the soul absorbed in itself, in spiritual trance, absorbed in God realization in the heart. And that's a trance that fully awakens us and connects us with reality. It's not an escapist trance. And that's the original and ultimate altered state of consciousness of the spirit soul, for sure. Thank you, Len.
Hare Krishna.
Yoda.
Thank you for the class, dear Govinda. I had a question. We're speaking in the context of Brahma taking Brahmanan initiation. We're speaking in the context of our current disciplic succession and then our current experience presently. And I'm kind of wondering, because I know there's other like Brahmas, in different universes. And so does a Brahma, does it sometimes he does not take Brahman initiation? Does that happen as well? Or is this like universal? This like standard procedure for Brahma's experience.
Okay, thanks for your question. Right, so you're referring to, this is about the Brahma of our universe. And there are innumerable universes, and each are led by a Brahma. And all of these unlimited trillions of universes are just during the exhalation of one exhalation of the Mahavishnu, Yakarana, Jale, Bhajati, Smayoga. And then there's before this exhalation, there was other exhalations, and there will be more. So there's so many Brahmas. I don't know much about their history. So we know that what's happening here, it's not mechanical. It might be standard, but it's not, there's nothing mechanical happening here. It's so radically personal. I don't know much about other Brahmas. We know something about other Brahmas because we get it from Bhagavatam. It is there. So for example, the Brahma in our universe, as we see in this, is a pure devotee. Some Brahmas, they're devotees, but their devotions mixed with karma. Some Brahmas, their devotions mixed with gyan. Okay, so not all Brahmas are pure devotees, like the Brahma of this universe. As far as whether they go through a Brahminical initiation in the same way, with Krishna initiating them in the with the Gayatri mantra through the heart, I don't have information on that. Similarly, whether they have the same sort of realization of Goloka. I'm thinking if Brahmas, if their devotions tinged with desire for gyan or karma, they might not have the consciousness to have the same sort of realization of Goloka Vrindavan, but I don't have specific information. Thank you, Garuda.
Following up on Gauda's question, I'm thinking like the whole purpose of the material manifestation is Bhakti Yoga, Krishna consciousness, and there is no other purpose to the material manifestation. So coming from that platform of looking at no other purpose, I can imagine that regardless the purity of the Brahma, Brahma is at the head of creation. And as such, at the head of creation is going to be fully endowed with the knowledge of fulfilling the purpose of the creation.
Yeah, that makes sense. That principle completely makes sense. Yes. Yeah, fully empowered to do his service excellently. Yeah. Now, as far as the details might be shifted according to different universes, but the principle is there. Thank you, Malin. Sri Brahma Samhita ki. Jai. Srila Prabhupada ki. Jai. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Goswami ki. Jai. Thank you all. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Hare Krishna.